Lucia, I wanted to ask you at some point, and this seems like a good time, that one of the descriptions, or I often saw in a lot of the reading I did, that it was important that there not be a lot of rules or structure in the therapy room itself, that the person really have an opportunity to do whatever that guiding presence that you're talking about, that guiding spirit led them to do. Is that a requirement of doing Sandplay therapy?
That's the main rule.
Okay.
That there are no rules.
Okay.
The main concept that is so incredibly powerful and seems so easy that Dora Kolff discovered that is that if you create a space into which the psyche can move, it will reveal itself and it will heal itself. And she called that the free and protected space. Very few of us have any experience with that, because usually when we meet someone, they are seeing us through their perspective, through their ego. They don't see who you are really at all. And in the therapy room, whoever, whatever the client is welcomed and protected and sponsored. And that really is a unique experience. And then when they feel that freedom and that protection, then the unconscious will reveal itself in symbolic form.
Okay. How much rapport do you, it sounds like you would really need to have some strong rapport with someone. I mean, I guess I'm wondering, does somebody just come in the first session and do this? I mean, I would think you'd have to have met several times before somebody'd be willing to expose themselves in that way.
I think so.
Okay.
But you see, everyone is different. So I can't say this is the way you do it or this is the way you don't do it. You kind of are just there. The therapist is just there. And if it takes 3 or 4 sessions of talking, that's fine. If they want to do a tray first time, the minute they come in, that's fine. Okay. Anything is fine.
Okay. I would guess there are a lot of adults would have a lot of self-consciousness in terms of trying to second-guess the figures they were choosing and that sort of thing.
Very uncomfortable.
Okay.
We're used to functioning with rules.
Yeah.
And one of the questions I get asked a lot is, what are the rules? And I say, there are no rules. That doesn't make them feel good at all.
No.
And then they say, what does this mean?
There you go.
And I say, what do you think it means? And they say, I don't know. And I say, that's perfect. But it takes a little while. So sometimes the first trays of adults are a little more superficial, a little more oriented to this is going on right now in my life. And as they feel that this is a place that is safe and protected for them, then they go deeper and deeper and deeper into their own unconscious and then into the collective, which has no human figures, no animal figures. It's completely vegetation, rocks, shells, earth, primal.
Okay. So we're talking about collective unconscious, we're talking about primal.
Yes.
Could we also be talking about archetypes?
Yes.
Okay, let's take a look at the next graphic I have that explains archetypes a little more specifically for us. Archetypes, as Carl Jung described them, are deep and abiding patterns in the human psyche that remain powerful over time. They are seen clearly in dreams, art, literature, and myth. By observing what we do and how we interpret what we do, we can identify the archetypes that guide our lives. So when I first read that, it really struck me that there probably are different layers to this. And I certainly know I chose goddess figures to open the show with, and very ancient figures, 7,000 years old, to sort of demonstrate this concept that there are kind of abiding perceptions we have that do seem to go across time and continent.
There are common experiences that all mankind, cultural, religious, racial, doesn't matter, have when they live their life. We all experience death. We all experience mother. We all have an experience of child, of spiritual God. And so we carry that experience of a life process within us, all of us. But it takes a personal experience with that archetype to trigger it out into our consciousness and give us the energy that these archetypes hold. For instance, a very young child has no emotional response to death at all. It is just after their pet dies, or grandma dies, or a bird dies, and they experience fear and being lonely and lost, that there begins to be a connection with all mankind and what all mankind has experienced with that.
Okay. There are some specific archetype examples that I had put together that I was hoping you could talk about with us.
Okay.
To get, even because you said in terms of personalizing this, I think the more specific we can be, probably the more helpful it will be. So let's take a look. I chose king, warrior, martyr, magician, orphan, and innocent. And I do have those in front of me, so if you didn't memorize the list, that's okay. The first of these was sort of the king figure. Do you see that come up in people's sand trays or as they look at themselves?
That stands for some kind of power, sometimes for wisdom, sometimes for depression, depending on what the personal experience has been, you see. So we might have a good king or a bad king.
Okay.
And then as it gets deeper down into the collective, the label king disappears, and what you have maybe is a father figure. And if you go even deeper than that, you'll come to a God figure. So that's why kings used to say that their power was God-given.
Yes.
That came from an archetypal level, you see.
Okay. Actually, in my experience working with people, particularly people in recovery, one of the normal processes of beginning to look at the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous is connecting with a higher power.
Yes.
And what I have seen is similar to what you've said, which is our very first experience of a God or higher power often is represented by our parents.
That's right.
So immediately what I thought about was, yes, depending on that first experience, it's going to be either a positive association or it may be negative and oppressive.
Exactly. And you'll see that in the tray. So then you will understand what that individual's relationship is to power.
Okay.
Whether they see it as something to be avoided, whether they see it as something that they have to defend against. And the tray, the series of trays, and the healing aspect of the self draws them to integrate their own power in a positive way.
Okay. How about the, let's look at martyr, for example. Now, how does that get played out at the different levels?
Well, martyr sometimes is connected with good people die. Bad things happen to good people. And this would speak very, very clearly to someone that had had a very difficult life, that kept putting themselves in situations where they lost. And then as you go down to deeper levels, you come to a level of sacrifice. That sometimes there is a need to sacrifice for that which is greater, but not in a way that it can be taken from you. You surrender to a higher power rather than being struck down in fury by a higher power. So it shifts depending upon how your own ego sees surrender, which is not a fun thing to think about for anybody.
No. Well, I think that whole prospect of surrender for many people conjures up so much powerlessness that we just run. We just run.
Right.
And my experience has been that often in surrender, I've actually regained power because I've stopped fighting something that I really had no control over to begin with.
That's right. But when you're struggling, to know that that's going to happen doesn't make it any easier for you to let go. When you're in that process of surrendering, it's very difficult and very frightening.
Yes, it is. It also occurs to me that what you're saying in terms of martyrs has to do with normalizing suffering too.
All of this is a balancing out of opposites. And that's one of Jung's main concepts. Everything has its polarity. And you need to see both, be with both, and then bring them together in an integrated form. So you have, like the yin-yang symbol,
Yes.
both the light and the dark together in a whole. And you need to do that with everything.
Well, I know that nature religions really talk about that there is no polarity in the sense it's always one thing.
It is one thing,
is one
but
thing.
we choose to relate to only half of something.
Okay.
And in that way we limit ourselves terribly. And this is quite a non-threatening way to expose the other side, the side that we have rejected and split off from ourselves, no matter what we're talking about.
Okay, so it's a really, again, we come back to the word integration.
That's right.
We have a couple more minutes. I'm curious about orphans.
There's so many myths about that, like Moses and the bulrushes. I think that when separation from the mother happens too fast, before the ego feels strong enough to cope with life, we tend to feel like a motherless child. And any time that we feel lost and afraid, the old spirituals,
Yes.
I'm a motherless child,
Yes.
that is in us that comes up when we feel alone, and that we have no power.
Okay. So actually, I have the sense as you're speaking that all of these archetypes are in all of us.
Yes,
We may identify with one more than the other,
yes,
but if I really look at the overall pattern of my life, I probably play all of them out
Yes,
in
you do.
various times.
depending upon what happens in your life situation, which one gets activated.
Do you think spiritually at some level we might even be called to a particular affinity with certain archetypes?
I think it depends upon our personal experience.
Okay.
Our experience of the archetypes comes through our personal experience.
Okay, so really, and we're going to need to close, we're talking about looking at the pattern of our personal lives in order to understand, or as our filter really for any of this. Okay, I want to thank you so much for
You're
coming.
welcome.
I appreciate such a clear explanation of what can be a little cloudy to people, but
Yes,
I understand it a little better. I hope you do. Stay with us, join us next week as we talk about adolescence and addiction. I'm Mary Crocker Cook. Good night.
For topic